Welcome, everybody, to Today in Space. I am, as always, your space science podcast host from the East Coast, Alex G. Orfanos. And we're here for another episode of Today in Space. And we're here for an episode of People of Science, where we talk to people in the industry, the space industry specifically here. So we're very excited to introduce John Conafay of Integrate. John, tell us a little bit about yourself and say hi to the folks on the podcast.
Hey, everybody, and thanks for having me on today. John Conafay, CEO and co-founder of Integrate, making the world of collaborative hardware engineering more seamless. Got my start in technology at a very, very early age. I think it built a first water-cooled, overclocked Pentium 200 MMX, if that dates me, when I was in sixth grade.
That was like before anyone was doing anything like that, right?
I think PC, like, what was it called? It was like PC hardware. It wasn't PC Mag. It was like the computer world, like really, really nerdy, deep tech kind of I don't know, before Tom's Hardware, or maybe when Tom's Hardware was just coming up.
Yeah, I remember Egghead that's where
Yeah,
I got my
yeah,
games. Yeah.
I remember Egghead as well.
Yeah, we're old, but it's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's always been in love with technology. And then when I was in the Air Force, it became more focused on aerospace, and then uh, found out about students for the exploration and development of space while I was at Arizona State University, and fell head over heels in love with the space industries. I came for the technology and stayed for the people. And am now building software to make that all easier after a long decade in various space startups.
Yeah, so wow, there's a lot to unpack there. I think your journey is really cool, man. I was seeing some of the jobs that you've had, business development, and I really like this cross section of, you know, people that we get to interview that are in the business side of space. I'm an aerospace engineer, so I go to a lot of like the hardware and how cool it is that it's progressing us forward. But I also love the business of space. So could you just give us a little quick run through like what is business development and like what attracted you to that as a
Yeah,
career choice?
yeah, absolutely. So I think the one of the biggest things I had to come to terms with early on was the amount of discipline I had to get really, really deep into math, as well as
Mm.
massive dyslexia. I don't know if I actually have dyslexia, so I'm not going to say that, but I've been told multiple times, like, those aren't the numbers, and you switched these signs, and that's a six, not a nine. And that was, I had to remember my economics professors being so pissed off with me because they were like, you got all of this right, except you just changed these numbers in the middle of the equation. And I was like, that sucks.
You're like, I'm not doing it on purpose.
Exactly. It's not like I
Yeah.
just want, um, but I've always really, really been huge on building community and being parts of communities, like really deep in loving the kind of reciprocal care that you find in really cool communities. Early on, it was with a bunch of hardware and computer nerds. Then it turned to music and being in the punk and hardcore scenes in like North Carolina, Virginia, DC area, and kind of
Sick.
finding a lot of family there. uh, and that's all about community at these live shows. I think I went to a live show 5 days a week from 14 to 21 every single week,
Wow.
pretty much. Like it was insane. So a lot of community there. And then the military's specific
Yeah.
community, and I always wanted to build like cycling clubs or things like this.
Mhm.
And so that's probably what guided me toward the business side of things most, is that you really get to solve people's problems in a really, really interpersonal way, which I really love doing. I love doing it was record label. I started straight out of high school. Loved doing it. Was recording audio in my mom's garage uh, when I was really really young, and and then it just communicated very well to the business development and sales. It should just be called sales, like business development in the way that I was doing it, or like the way that I said it was sales. It should have just been
Mm,
sales, except I want some lofty strategic title when none of that stuff really matters. I don't know where the family
mm.
tier is, so I'll hold back my expletives. But where
Oh, you can let it
when
go here. If you
oh
don't
yeah,
care, I don't care.
yeah. But like largely, I was kind of bullshitting myself into calling it business development when it was just sales, and
Mm,
it's still a very very important function, but business development seems more important and more strategic and things like this.
mm.
When all of the startups that I was working at, the most important thing that you could do is just get money in the
Bring money
door.
in.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. And like
Yeah,
that's a really good point. And like my gut wants to push back and say that I don't know if sales necessarily are done the way that you're describing it, and that I grew up, my father's a salesman,
yeah,
and there's a difference between like true belly to belly sales and providing value, and then there's also this other side that's kind of profit at all costs.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's the area I would push back on. But
yeah.
but I think
Absolutely.
it's really cool because especially most of us that get engineering degrees or in science, STEM degrees, something like that. Like you're doing research or you're doing a project, and like you don't realize how important, like, you get funding in those areas, right? You don't
Yeah,
realize outside having a job in science how important the money is to keep all of that going.
yeah,
um
yeah.
it's
Well,
very underrated.
absolutely, and even I mean, I would say going after funding in Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, which
Yeah, you've
is
done it all.
a
Yeah.
student-led nonprofit, that's still technically sales in a lot of ways, and gave me a lot of the basis for reaching out to these big audacious people. Like we garnered,
Mm,
um, I never directly spoke to him, but we got in Jeff Bezos's donation to
mm,
SEDS, and that was like a big goal of
that's
ours.
awesome.
But we had to have everything prepped in an actual stable organization. When I was working in labs at ASU, we had to go after funding. So the proposals that we had to put in, to your point, for those labs taught me so much about sort of government and scientific sales that really helped me get
Yeah.
into the federal spaces that I have and all those things. So it's all interrelated. If you're going out and asking for money, you're doing some real hard work for
Yeah.
sure. On top of building the incredible things and the ambitious machines that people are building.
Folks, this week we're talking with John Conafay, the CEO of Integrate, and we're talking about business development. We're talking about his STEM origin story. And one of the things that I love about talking with all these people of science that we interview, a lot of people in business, a lot of people in the space industry, but there's a lot, all these people are using their brains and their minds and their bodies to go through trying to achieve the impossible, create a new company that's providing a service that's never existed before, like John's case here with Integrate. And we are totally in that match ourselves. We're by day, we're an engineer, by night, we're a podcaster, and it's never bad to ask for help. And one of the things that is in our toolkit here to help us in the grind of trying to do the seemingly impossible, although surprisingly probable, is using Magic Mind. Now, Magic Mind is a productivity shot. We have been using it for 28 days straight here, so 4 weeks now. And, for us, it has made a huge difference. And caffeine's a huge part of our lives here, and I'm sure it's very probable it's a part of yours as well. I just am able to work harder and faster with caffeine. I'm more focused, which is definitely something I try to work on. And the interesting thing about Magic Mind and this journey that I've been on here is that it's supplementing all of the other things that you don't get with caffeine. Caffeine is a great, superb thing, but it is going to, with more use just make you more tired because it's just helping you forget how much you're losing. So, the Magic Mind Productivity Shot is a way to keep yourself refreshed, keep yourself filled with things like adaptogens and essentials for daily life, like vitamin D and C, and so many other things that are in the Magic Mind Shot. But don't just take it from me. Go to magicmind.com/today20. Use the code today20 and you'll get up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off one-time purchase by using the code today20 at checkout. That's magicmind.com/today20. Try the productivity shot today, and they've got some other products that are coming up as well. Go check them out, magicmind.com/today20, and just add another tool to your toolkit of getting yourself in the position to make these big, impossible dreams possible. We'll be there right with you. So, today in Space 20, make sure to use it. Thanks for joining us. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, and I think that's something I would, for me in my journey, just to give you a little bit myself, like
Yeah.
I have been working in the 3D printing industry. I've done, I got my degree in aerospace, but I really didn't find a job. I'm up here in Massachusetts, and while there's
Oh,
some
awesome.
definitely, um, it was a struggle. And so I started this podcast to talk about space and talk to people. Um, and so then I ended up getting into 3D printing because through the podcast, I was researching it and thought, hey, let me buy one, put it together. Now I've got 14 of them in my basement and I have run a small
Nice.
parts lab. But
Oh,
that
that's
got me
awesome.
into 3D printing as an
Yeah.
industry. So I started in sales as an
Yeah.
application engineer. So
Cool.
and a regional technical manager. I was helping bring in the money and kind of close deals. And I really liked that.
Yeah.
It was really, really interesting. And then now I'm working kind of post sales, helping in the customer support side of things. So I'm all people based at this
Yeah.
point in
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
science. Um,
Awesome.
but it's a unique skill. Like it's something that I think goes underrated, especially in the space industry. So
Yeah.
um, how what about the business of space is different than say other industries?
Risk. Full
Really?
stop. Risk.
Right
It's,
away.
I mean, yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, what I have learned from going into other industries with Integrate, because we're building for all complex hardware, is every single industry thinks that they are the hardest for some unique reason, and they are absolutely the hardest with those constraints specifically.
Hmm.
But it all comes out to pretty much the same. Like space is incredibly hard because once you send something up, you generally can't get it back, and there's so many
Yeah.
people and things companies started to figure out how to solve that problem. But you're also putting one complex machine on top of another complex machine developed by somebody entirely different. Largely, I mean,
Right.
you have unique cases like SpaceX sending up their own Starlink satellites, but you're taking something that you might have been working on for 2 to 20 years and putting it on somebody else's definition of complex hardware. Like
Ah,
it is rocket science,
when you
and
describe it like
hoping,
that. Oh,
yeah, exactly. And it's not only the 7 minute journey, well, 7 minute if you're lucky, for
yeah.
low Earth orbit journey to get to space, then you get deployed if something goes wrong with that. And then if on orbit there's something fundamentally wrong that you can't communicate with your satellite or your people, we won't go down that path. Um, there's so many things that can go wrong and so much risk, and the vibration of the rocket can damage
Yeah.
things on the way to orbit. You could be deployed one of the absolute coolest full stop missions in the absolute world, or recoveries thereafter. Obviously, I'm sure they don't see it as cool as I do because it's tough for a company to go through this. But Starfish sent up a satellite that was deployed, and by no fault of their own, because of the orbital transfer vehicle that they were on, was deployed and spinning it. I think it was like 300 hertz, like 300 times a
Mm,
second, like absolutely insanely fast. And
yeah.
then they detumbled it and were able to carry out some of their missions. Like mind-bogglingly cool,
Yeah.
and something I don't think's ever been done before. So that is all to say, If you don't break it on the ground, there's a chance to break it on the way, and if you don't break it on the way, there's a chance to break it on deploy, and if you don't break it on deploy, it's a chance that it's broken on orbit, and there's no way to get it back to fix it. And these are now the cost is coming down like drastically across the board, but there's so much risk involved in just getting to the point where you're like, does my science experiment work? Does my telescope work? Does my anything else work? Do all my deployments work for a $27 billion program or $9 billion program, whatever it was with JWST? It's a
Yeah,
risk, I would say. Makes it a lot different.
100%. And so how is integrate helping with that?
Yeah. We discuss risk as all of the opportunities for passing the baton when you're collaborating and coordinating with people
Uh,
in a relay race, which just about everything is when you think about it. The most risky aspect is passing the baton. So whether it's you as a design firm passing on to contract manufacturing to build a specific portion of your hardware, or you coordinating with your spacecraft customer all of the 3,000, rough estimate tasks, milestones, and requirements necessary to
mm,
just get one spacecraft on, made into a rocket to be able to launch.
yeah,
Um, the opportunity for error and the ball getting dropped or missing things, entire parts of this process, is so much greater when you have to build your source of truth internal to your company, extract and dissect a piece of that via an Excel spreadsheet from this great program that you might have that only works internally, email it to somebody else. You have a 2 week cadence check in with them. All of the schedule and everything's changing on their side. And then you have to re ingest that into your schedule later. Like, that's a lot of baton passing with very, very complex information. Another example would be dealing with not dealing with, communicating with the manufacturing engineer or the manufacturer on the actual line about a specific part that you've built, and then coming back and saying, Hadrian's doing a lot of great work to this, and we hope to be a part of the greater ecosystem that's but communicating directly with manufacturing technicians that are on the line building and programming these machines to build the part of your greater machine.
yeah,
All of these opportunities are places for the baton to be dropped. And with Integrate, you're able to seamlessly collaborate and coordinate with external stakeholders in a way that no other application, full stop, allows you to do. You can have your source of truth and then explicitly share specific parts of that source of truth with whoever you need to collaborate with, and it becomes a part of their source of truth.
mm,
And then so on and so on. They can start collaborating with their suppliers, and their suppliers can start collaborating with their suppliers. So you have this one gigantic schedule that the entire world is on and actually operates as, without having to download, send, wait for inputs, receive, upload,
right.
fix.
I mean, it's crazy how much of that there is in a company between departments and teams.
Exactly. Yeah.
So to
100%.
scale that between other companies with their own teams
Yeah.
is outrageous.
Absolutely. And there was a, not to keep, talking about Adrian, but there's this interview that happened with Chris Powers, and where they're talking about it in American industrials and engineering, and how we've reached a limit with the systems and tooling that we use, that if we don't automate or get these processes down better and more streamlined, we've hit an upper limit on what we can produce and how much we can produce at a specific time. And that's, the entire point of technology, and where all these software for hardware companies are coming in,
Mm.
is to uncap that constraint. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, going back, I think of the interview I had with Jordan Noon of Embedded Ventures, and he was talking about the challenge they're trying to do, which is integrating new technology with the space industry, which is military, which is commercial, so that we can actually, progress and build our infrastructure and have some kind of. I mean, you've seen it with the Air Force, which I assume is a little bit more higher tech than the others. But I could be wrong. But but
We're trying to help there, you know.
right, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so good to have your experience, and thank you for your service, first of all.
Oh,
But um, like it help me understand, and the folks listening here, like that challenge of the space industry that's kind of unique, where it crosses over this academic, defense, commercial period, and we're at this really unique time where we could take advantage of this opportunity and really advance a lot of things, which it sounds like Integrate is trying to do. Um, just give us a little bit more insight into the challenge that's at play here for the U.S. space industry.
yeah. Um, Capacity is a lot of it. You know, a lot of things have been de-risked. You know, we might have these kind of monolithic companies that are our only access to space, but space is one of the only industries where you need someone else. You are not,
Mm,
you cannot, in very, very, very rare cases, can you be self reliant to get to space, to operate in space, and then to deconflict in space. Um, you know, the rare case being SpaceX, of course, or nation states
yeah.
that have orbital capability,
Mm,
like Russia or China and things like this, or nations rather, not nation states. Um, and and that's really unique. Like even if you're selling apples in Spain, you can sell apples in Spain without uh, having to rely on trains or ships or anything like this. You could go door to door and sell apples in Spain. You can't sell apples to America without planes or ships well, not trains, but um, uh, but in space, you are not operating on orbit without another entity a telling you that you're allowed to, and b on the regulation side, and b getting you there first of all. And there are only a handful of serious operators that give you that access to space.
mm,
So, and even those operators are constrained by where they launch and can launch out of. So you have massive constraints on how many rockets you can send up because you have to reprep the pad to launch the next day or in 24 hours or anything like this. Um, yeah, it's just a very highly constrained, very unique industry in that you have to be so interdependent on external facilitators and stakeholders on the U.S. government for federal ranges because there are so few private ranges out there. Two, I think. I
mm.
think it's Brownsville, Texas, and or maybe not Brownsville, Texas, but we're Boca Chica
Boca Chica, yeah.
and Alaska. And Alaska doesn't have the
Oh,
capacity for a Falcon 9 or for a Vulcan or anything. So
right.
you're beholden
Was
to,
the Astra
yeah,
launching out of there?
yeah, yep.
Oh, okay, okay.
Astra, ABL, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, no,
it's, yeah,
it was. Thank you. That was
yeah.
actually really good. The capacity thing is a really good point. And going back to the risk, it makes me wonder if the true secret sauce of SpaceX is that they have the largest source of truth and management of risk across all of these different systems that they're launching and integrating, that so many others are just so far behind on, or it takes
I
so
mean,
many people to rely on that it's
yeah.
difficult.
I mean, they have the largest data set by far, but that's through, I mean, unbelievable engineering effort and
Unreal.
I mean, superhuman. Uh, yeah, there's you say what you want about them, and there's plenty to say good and
Yeah.
not so great sometimes. Don't at me, but but I don't know if people even say that anymore, but but uh but they have the largest data set because they created the largest data set flat out,
Mm,
and that return to flight was proof positive about that. I mean,
mm,
absolutely unbelievable and spectacular that they were able to just say, well, we have hundreds of launches over the past 2 years, and not close to 1,000 necessarily, but a lot of launches
yeah.
to pull from, so we can hone in on this root cause and be back to flight in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It was unprecedented. Yeah,
Unprecedented, and like it's a really hilarious game of like I'll show you my data, you show me yours kind of thing, where they came in and nobody believed them. Then they built all this data and flight heritage, and so now it's not even a prototype anymore. It's not even they haven't flown it. It's they've
yeah,
flown more than anybody. They
exactly.
they lifted the entire U.S. launch market last year for world. Like we would have not been
Yeah,
the country in the world with the most launches had SpaceX not been involved.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
crazy.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is. It is.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
cool. I'm
It
excited to be
is.
on this timeline. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Tell me about your first time in the space industry. What was it like when you first joined? And was there anything that really surprised you?
yeah. Accessibility was shocking to me, like that I could be an economics and design student at Arizona State University and then somehow get involved with the space industry at all.
Mm,
For the first year I was a part of SEDS. I was the treasurer and then president of the local chapter, ran the largest student space conference, Space Vision 2013, and then became executive director of the national organization. um, I didn't believe or think that there was going to be any room for me in the space industry, because what's a business dude going to do? Um,
mm.
I can't build satellites, I can't build rockets. I'm not an aerospace engineer, all of these things. So I had definitely had a lot of, I hate the term imposter syndrome, just because I think I just
No,
had a lot of
it's
doubt,
accurate. Yeah,
It's true. Yeah,
yeah.
it's accurate, but I just had a lot of doubt about my place in space until I took a microgravity flight, and I was
Oh,
like,
that's awesome.
yeah, I was like, I got some really good advice from someone, and I can't remember exactly who it was right now, but they were like, go all in or don't. People can tell when
Mm,
you're 1 foot in. And I was 1 foot in, and they were like,
mm,
oh yeah, it was my friend, somebody I met on a plane, and then became really, really great friends with, who
that's
essentially
awesome.
said, screw you, you're too passionate to go into banking. If you love the
Wow.
space industry, which you do very obviously so much, go all in, and money will follow, or whatever you need will follow, as long as you really, really go all in.
I love
And
that.
yeah, it was dope. It was some of the best advice I'd ever gotten. It could have gone very poorly, but it didn't necessarily. So I went all in, hardcore on SEDS. I was like, I'm going to become part of the space industry. I felt like I told my parents, and I was nervous about telling my parents, even though I was like 27 and already served in the Air Force and all these things. It's like, I'm going to go in the space industry, and they're like, the what industry? Like, that's not a thing yet. And, but they were wildly supportive, as they always are. And so it was weird to be able to find a place in space that didn't feel like bullshit, like where I could actually contribute.
Mm,
Um, a lot of it came from piss and vinegar, and and then and probably being a little bit more belligerent with SEDS than I would have had the right to be in a company, like an actual, like
mm,
a institution that didn't need a little bit of rework. But Buddy, Hannah, and Jack, and a few others, and I Danny, kind of ripped SEDS up from the roots, and tried to rebrand it, reorchestrate it, make it function a little bit more like a real organization, so we
mm,
could get a lot of investment. And then I met all these really crazy, cool people at companies like Spire Global, and
mm,
didn't know it at the time. Astronus didn't exist at that time. Carissa Christensen, who was my first boss, like real boss in the space industry, interned at Spire Global because we toured it as a part of SEDS, and then Jenny Kuhn was an ASU alum, and so she got me really jazzed on the idea that there was a place in space for me, and so I wanted to go work at Spire. I think largely because of her, and did, and yeah, I just met like incredible people that were doing spectacular things, and so I was really surprised at how beautiful the community was in a lot of ways, and that I could find a place. I don't know. Yeah,
That's beautiful, man. I love the space industry for that. And I've interviewed a lot of people talking about their origin in the space industry or just like science in general. And I think space has it's one of the things that surprised me, even though I went to school for this. Um, I didn't have anybody else in my life that had any that was working in space or even as an engineer. And so like the people that I've met through this podcast and just talking in the space industry have been some of the greatest people, most like they're just so willing to help and push you to succeed. And uh, I am, it's so good to talk to and to hear so many other people have that experience. It seems to be a through point of the good of the space industry.
the technology stayed for the people for sure. And
I love that.
another aspect about people in the space industry that I personally love is everybody's got to be a little bit crazy. So you don't like it's not like the I don't know. You meet a lot of characters in a good way. Like it used to be that you meet some characters that you're like, okay, that is wackadoodle. Like that's
Yeah.
some spaced out, all pun intended, stuff. But everybody, because of the risk and because of the constraints and because of
Ah,
how difficult it is, you meet everybody that's drawn to it's just got a little bit of crazy in them, like the right amount of crazy in them. That's like, let's go
totally.
do this, and it's a lot of
Totally.
fun. It makes it a lot of fun.
Oh man, that is so interesting because like I think about what made me interested in space in the beginning, and it was that scene watching Apollo 13 where they dump the box of stuff and they're like, "We got to figure it out," and like
Yeah.
I wanted to be in that room figuring it out.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's not a normal thing to think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, you want to
Yeah.
be a part of one of the most stressful, hardest tasks that's seemingly impossible. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Sign me
Yeah.
up.
Let's go.
Glutton for punishment. So, like, I want to do space and I want to do startups in space. Does that work out? Can we do that? And
Yeah.
I've got chunks of gray in my beard from that decision. Full stop.
Well, it's brave. I mean, obviously, Today in Space is our communication company. AG3D is our 3D printing company. So like we're no stranger to that to the
Yeah,
entrepreneurial
it's awesome.
kick.
A lot of
Tell me
respect.
more about that. Like what was the point where you decided that you were going to do it on your own, or did you find a problem that needed solving and it was in your wheelhouse, or how did that come?
Yeah. So always really, I have no clue whether it's adventure or my dad being in business or and my
Mm.
mom pushing me into art and all these great diverse perspectives and wanting to just make a change or what it was, but I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit. Like,
Mm.
some people say they looked up at the stars and they wanted to be an astronaut since they were three or something. I was like, I want to build a business, like hardcore. Like I was selling like bootleg Jackass
Yeah.
VHS,
That's
when I was
awesome.
in like elementary or middle school or something like this. And then I think Tamagotchi as well. My mom was like, I could get like 50 of them for half off. I'll front you if you go sell them. And I was like, hell yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I
flip
love
life. I
this.
love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And uh, she was much more like, if you want to do this, I'll support you. But it wasn't like a go pedal this kid.
Right,
That
right.
sounded
Yeah.
terrible. Yeah, yeah. um, uh, uh, so the entrepreneurial aspect has been there throughout. Like I'm
Mm,
sitting with two people in the office right now who I tried to start a company with 10 years ago, and we just got a false start. But
mm,
um, but now we are.
Yeah.
That's one of the co-founders right there. um, and uh, and um, and so with this particularly, it was at Spire Global, and then brief stint with Bryce Tech, not to diminish it, that was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And then
Mm,
Astronus, Spaceflight, AVL Space Systems, and saw this common, like, and very frustrating problem, which was we'd bring a contract in, codify it in a PDF with our statement of work and all this, then transfer it over to mission management, who would strip out the statement of work, put it in an Excel file, upload it to Jira and Jama and Smartsheet, and you'd have all of this like ephemera around what you're actually trying to get done in all these different places and
Were
hand
they
over.
were they tipping over tea leaves to try and
Well,
understand
yeah, it
everything? Yeah.
felt like, yeah, it really, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
legitimately felt like that. One company I won't name, we had post-it notes on whiteboards for which satellites went where, and it was
Man.
like, it was maddening. Um, and so at each company, I had a different reason for starting a company that essentially was able to bring in all these inputs from external, synthesize them with our engineering teams or mission management teams or BD teams, and
Mm,
then have the outflows go out and make that as seamless a process as humanly possible. So, like, it sounds very, very nice and pretty now, and that sounds like a very straightforward story, but it was like each company had a different chunk of
mm,
the puzzle to get to what integrate is
mm,
now. But it started as mission management software, so coordinating a bunch of satellites on rideshare missions when we thought a lot more small launchers were going to be going up, so there was going to be
mm,
this kind of glut. And then we realized what we built was just like a really excellent program and project management software that allowed for the seamless communication, internal and external. So, we're
mm.
building for hardware because it is inherently collaborative. So yeah, so essentially, I saw a problem that I'd seen three times before, and was like, okay, I got to go fix this,
Yeah.
and finally pulled the trigger, and that's how it started Integrate. Yeah,
That's cool. And how were those early days of starting things up? I think, you know, having the idea and the passion for getting after it, or like even just focusing in on like what you actually want to do, is one thing. And then there's the next like hump of like, how do we get funding? How do we build? How do I hire? Like, tell
yeah.
me a little bit about those early days, and even if you're still there, like it's such a cool. I love small business environments,
Oh,
so
me too.
to
Yeah,
me, it's exciting. It's the adrenaline rush is worth it for for
yeah,
the other side. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, jump into that. I think that's a great story.
Yeah, the so I have a lot of friends having kids now, and they explain this phenomenon of how you don't necessarily remember them your kids at
Mm.
specific stages because the hormones take over, and if you remembered how hard it was, you wouldn't do it again and again again or something like that. And I'm not like raising kids is, I don't know if you want to call whatever, is a much bigger task than starting a company. And I have utmost respect for people
Mm,
that do it. But it felt a lot like that, where it was horrifying and terrifying and
mm,
painful in the moment, and it is every step. But the adrenaline and the great, like, the aspects about it that get me out of bed every single day
mm,
are is it's painful, is it's exciting, it's a challenge that there's no backstop. If I screw up, there's no one to blame but myself. Like,
mm,
if people on the team, I absolutely love our team, and I think we picked some really spectacular players. But if they screwed up, it's ultimately my fault for not communicating directly or doing any of this. So that really all or nothing portion of it gets me going. I used to drink a fair amount, and probably drank more than I should have. and then once I got into the company, it was like, okay, I've got to do everything to optimize my life to make sure that like I can do
Wow.
this and maintain it and everything. So I completely cut out drinking. But I think it's because it was just chasing a different type of dopamine, you
Oh
know?
my god.
Yeah.
Uh, that's my story with cigarettes, man. I mean, it's
Yeah,
literally
yeah,
the nexus point of me starting this podcast. So that energy
yeah,
went right into this. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You have this like it's this
It's a
you
dragon.
have
Like it's
this
a literal beast that you're like, "Oh, no, this energy doesn't just stop. Like I got to
nope.
put it somewhere."
Exactly,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And it's fascinating. It's been fascinating every step of the way. A very, very dear friend was like, I could have probably worked harder on that. And she was just like smoking a cigarette, and she was like, just keep chasing it, Conafay. And I was like, damn it, because it was a great, hilarious call out, and it was true. You know, it's I work
Yeah.
out twice a day because of that conversation
Mhm.
now, and yeah, it's like this. Somewhere there's this just incessant energy and
Mhm.
need to push harder, faster, stronger, longer, all these things.
Yeah. It's like a
And
rocket prepped on the launch pad all the
yeah,
time.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Yeah. So there's nothing I'd rather be doing. Full stop. I'm in love with this. I'm in love with building. In love with the exhilaration, the pain, the heartache, the 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 community, all of it. Uh, I can't really imagine doing anything except building to this degree ever again.
Yeah.
So, I don't
Did
know
you
if that answered your question again, but
No, that was great.
yeah.
Did you feel that when you were seeing these issues, was that like bubbling up at that time? Like, did you? I guess you were entrepreneurial from when you were a kid. Did you kind of have this feeling of like, I'm working here, but ultimately I'm working towards something else? Or did you, were you just all in on what you were doing and then and then it just came back to you like, oh yeah, I could start my own thing?
That's a good question. I think other people knew more and better than I
Uh,
did that I was always building toward starting my own company because I
Funny
always
how that
felt,
works.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I always felt like I was all in where I was, but it probably didn't feel like it or seem like it in
Mm,
a lot of ways to my bosses, and I make the it's not a joke. I tell this all the time. I've gone back to every single one of my bosses before and apologized for because the shit that I would kick and scream about probably wouldn't
yeah.
make it to the top 75 of my priority lists now, and you know they had 250 or 500 people that, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and one of my one of my friends and former bosses said, "It's a circle of life, man. You never know until you know, and now you know." Period.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the most gracious things anybody could have ever said. So I always thought I was all the way in wherever I was, but it could have been more. And I'm sort of glad I wasn't because I wouldn't be here if it was. If that makes sense.
It does. To me, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I could relate. There's so much to being. That's why I love doing these episodes, talking to folks like yourself, because there's such a human side to this that is really, when you're going to school for this or you think you're jumping in, it's just not, it doesn't make sense. Just like you were saying, like about the imposter syndrome. Like even myself, as I have a degree in aerospace engineering, it took me a long time to get it, but I have it. It's on my
Yeah.
wall. They
Yeah.
can't take that away from me. But um, it's it's so it's so interesting how that's not really seen as valuable. And um, thank you for sharing your story because I think that's so much of it. I mean, didn't we just have, I think it was the head of Axiom Space
Yeah.
just is not going to be heading that up
Yeah.
anymore?
Yeah. That's the case for 6 or 7 different space companies
Yeah.
recently, and I just want to shout out to all the founders that did start those companies and
Yeah.
decided to step back or whatever happened. None of my business.
No. And
They put that value into the world, and whatever's happening now, it's
yeah.
happening. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
space has an interesting, I mean, we live in a world where companies, not in the space industry start and stop and,
yeah,
it's not the way that our parents or their parents were where, you worked at a place for 40 years. You
yeah,
get a pension. It's just not like that anymore. But the space industry, even like doing something in the space industry is on such a time scale that like I'm so impressed that we're a decade in or so of SpaceX getting involved here. And like the fact that there are so many people that are still there, that are still working there or have been there for more than 5 years is crazy. And
yeah,
that's the kind of stuff that keeps that place up. But
yeah. Not
also,
to take this. Oh, sorry.
no, no, I was just gonna say, but
Yeah,
also there's people that, have to back out and change, and
yeah,
that's totally okay. Um,
exactly.
but sorry, what were you gonna say?
Oh, no, no, no! I didn't mean to interrupt your thought there. It just makes me think. I was literally having this conversation last night with
Oh wow.
someone about Jensen Huang's. He's like, I am not here to make you comfortable. I am here to make this company NVIDIA successful,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
uh, and that he's notoriously tough to work for. But you have 80% of his team that's been there for 30. I don't remember how long Nvidia's been around, but a long time, and so many of his senior execs have stayed with him from the beginning because they believed in what
Hmm.
they were building, and they believed in being pushed farther, faster, and all these things. And it seems very, very analogous to SpaceX as well. The people that stick with it and stay in are in.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of those people are, well, I shouldn't say a lot because I don't actually know, but I do know a few folks that work there, and it seems like a good amount of those people that have been there a long time are the people that just would not have fit in those other big monolithic companies, and they weren't okay with the pace of the industry. So there's an angsty teenager in all of those people that are like,
One
"Hey,
hundred
I
percent. Yes,
this
exactly.
person could be an ass sometimes, but you know what?
Yeah,
We're actually doing things." And like that's the
exactly,
equation of like these really driven people and what they're doing. And I think when that equation of you're doing great things and someone is difficult gets out of whack, that's really a recipe for disaster for a company.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like the toxic, toxic aspects not good. Something being difficult and pushing people out of their comfort zone, that's different. But
Yeah.
toxic, abusive, there's definitely a line to draw in all these ways for sure.
Totally. Yeah, and we were just talking about those two companies, like those numbers, that data, you know, backs up like, hey, they're still there.
Yeah, yeah,
Whatever
absolutely.
you want to say. But
Yeah, not only still there. Jeez.
thriving.
Just, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Um tell me more about what you're seeing in the industry right now. Just in general, like what are you excited about that's happening in space right now?
Yeah. Um, I'm still excited about small launch. I gotta say that might just
Hmm.
be like reckless optimism, but
Hmm.
it's so hard, like so hard, and we keep seeing um these trials over and over from these relentless companies, and I'm excited to see the ones that push through and make it happen, because talk about talk about painful. Like he spent all of this time and energy leading up to this incredible moment, and then you have an explosion on the pad,
Hmm.
and or any number of things happen. It's rough, and hats off to these people that are just willing to throw themselves in the altar and throw themselves in the pyre to make this happen, because we still think it's absolutely necessary. We can't have a monolithic force um, in charge of all of our access to space. Not anything against SpaceX, just
Yeah.
we need competition. I think everybody would agree to that, and need options. Uh, so yeah, I don't know if excited is it, but I really, maybe it's just the piss and vinegar in me that wants to see some of these succeed.
Yeah.
um, and then a lot of human spaceflight stuff's picking up, like the fact that there's Axiom sending people to the space station regularly. That the fact that Fram 2, I believe is the name of the mission, is going up because some dude, all respect to him for I don't know, which is kind of the cool part is, Fram 2 is just a dude that made a bunch of money that wanted to go see the poles because he was obsessed with that exploration. So he bought a flight and brought a bunch of his friends. Like,
Yeah.
how amazing is that?
Dive more into that because I we haven't done an episode yet on that. So just give the
Oh yeah,
folks like a quick explanation of that.
yeah. So there's this Bitcoin billionaire who essentially, at the advent of, or as far as best I know, I've read very little about it. Um, uh, who mined a bunch of Bitcoin early on, became a billionaire because of it, went and traveled the world. But for all intents and purposes, it's not like started this company that's a household name that knows, anything
Right.
like this. It's some guy that made some really great choices and did some
Yeah.
really cool stuff. And then he's really into polar exploration. So he bought a flight to I think it's the first like 61.2 degree flight over the
Mhm.
poles, to go see the poles from space, uh, and bring a bunch of his traveling buddies along with him. They're probably very esteemed, revered
Yeah.
people in their fields. Don't get me wrong, but like it was like, hey, I want to buy this flight with a bunch of my friends. It's obviously not accessible to the general population. Don't get
Right.
me wrong,
Right.
but this is where it all starts.
Yeah, I mean
This is like, yeah,
that was airlines, right? Like
yeah,
they didn't
exactly,
exist before we had a bunch of people with money who paid for the
yeah,
flights. So it
exactly,
developed. Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
crazy. And the adventure aspect, I think, between that mission, we've got Polaris Dawn, August 26th.
yeah,
Um,
amazing,
like, yeah, and before that, Inspiration 4, which Jared Isaacman's doing a very similar thing. Like,
yeah,
we we need folks like that. I think for the long game of like it just aligns with what the exploration factor is of the final frontier, right?
yeah,
Like
absolutely,
I think those big stories and moments are going to be really important for building the future. And I mean, as we have arguably in the next 10 years some really insane adventures to the moon and to Mars, assuming knock on
absolutely,
wood here, everything
yeah,
continues to grow and progress. There will definitely be downsides and challenges,
yeah,
but there always are. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I love seeing all this stuff and the fact that it's going to I mean the fact that those missions are even financially viable for
yeah,
people like that is
exactly,
insane in its own right.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Feels like we've turned a corner.
Mm.
Feels like a very, very long product market fit game. To
Yeah.
be completely honest, it's like, well, we don't have economics in space because we don't have people in space. Well, we got to get people to space. Why are
Mhm.
we getting people to space? Well, they want to go. Okay, what are we going to find in space that allows, and it just seems like this
Yeah.
like long, complex PMF kind of
It's
search.
crazy,
But
and setting up, like, a space economy, essentially,
yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
once those things get to a point where they're so in demand, then all the
Yeah,
other infrastructure like, we've talked a lot about, like, we're going back to the moon, but
yeah,
there's so much infrastructure. There's so many things that we don't have at the moon that we have here, that
exactly.
if the regular human being, even just a regular American, went and actually, like, got a 50-second breakdown of all the things we don't have out there
Yeah,
and what you wouldn't have with you, like GPS, your phone's not going to work, like simple stuff,
yeah,
no
yeah,
roads.
yeah,
Like it's the literal frontier, and
yeah,
we have a lot of work ahead of us as humanity to get to that point.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Very much agreed. It's
And so to
pretty
tie the
epic.
knot, integrate
Yeah,
can help with all of that of
yeah,
making the long-term path and the mitigation of risk lower and just allow programs to actually like succeed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Um,
fantastic, man.
yeah. Awesome.
We're running here on the hour here. First of all, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you so much.
I love your punk background.
Yeah.
I I totally relate with that, and it's so nice to meet another one like me.
Awesome. 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 Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to tell the folks? Whether it's a little tidbit of motivation, I think you already did about joining the space industry or going after what you're doing, or just another note to close out this amazing episode so far.
Yeah. Whatever you're doing doesn't have to be a startup or anything else. Just keep going. It
Mm.
generally gets better. It usually gets better. Just keep going.
Amazing. John Conafay, thank you so much for being on. Tell the folks where, if they're interested in working at Integrate or learning more about you, where can they learn more?
Yeah, you can hit us up at integrate.co. You have the ability to sign up for a free trial, get a little bit of onboarding, and walk through that. So you can check out what we're building if you're building complex hardware, or we're free for university teams as well. So go ahead and sign up and explore, and we'll onboard you and show you how to use it, and you can use it with your .edu for the rest of your life if you want to. And
I love that.
yeah, yeah, come check us out. Say hi.
Beautiful. John, thank you so much for being on the podcast and another episode of Today in Space.
Thank you so much.
And everybody, spread love, spread science, be well, and we'll see you on the next episode of Today in Space. See ya.